Loza tweeted this out today, the face of pure evil, with a still picture of someone I'm not the biggest fan of, James O'Baconface. Now, hyperbole aside, I'm obviously not a big fan of James O'Baconface, predominantly because of the staggering hypocrisy of a man who loves to call everybody a gammon, constantly name-calling. Everybody's a gammon. Gammon this and gammon that. And yet, he looks as if his entire head was sculpted from a gigantic cube of salted pork. The hypocrisy is off the charts. He calls handsome devils like me gammon, and look at the clip of him. Like his head is 90% pepperami, but he calls everybody else names. Clearly he's never heard the old adage about not throwing stones in glass houses. Also, I mean, just look at his general behaviour. Nobody virtue signals as aggressively as that, unless they have an entire graveyard full of skeletons in their very, very large closet. That can be the only explanation for it. I think if he took his laptop to PC World to have it checked by technicians due to a CPU problem, he'd also have a legal problem, because I think that'd go the same way as it did when Gary Glitter did it. But I'm waffling. I'm going to cover the conversation he had with an irate farmer, because I've read a lot of stupidity and ignorance from people on the subject in the last week. It's not that complicated, but they make it complicated. So obviously the Bootneck's going to make it very, very simple, all right? And just as the cherry on top, I'm obviously going to, rip the piss out of the grotesque bacon face O'Brien. So let's get to it. The conversation that Lawrence had screen capped was this one, which is on the LBC website, and it says, angry farmer who hates James O'Brien calls in to debate inheritance tax. What, you hate James O'Brien? Why? Why? He's normally so reasonable, isn't he? I love the way they write that in the headline, like that's a surprise. For some reason, he hates James O'Brien. If I was to try and write a list of people that hate James O'Brien, I'd end up with fingers like a gnarled 98-year-old woman with chronic arthritis. I'd have fingers like a face hugger. That list numbers in the tens of millions. Basically anyone who's ever listened to him. And it's again because of that aforementioned hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is a very strange thing, isn't it? It's probably the most detestable of things. And it's what made me into a chippy atheist when I was in my early 20s and I didn't know any better. When you see some preacher and he's gobbing off about the evils of drugs and homosexuality, and then a month later they obviously arrest him because he's found conker deep in some rent boy's dirt box whilst ripped to the tits on wobbly eggs and meth or whatever else they do out here. I'm showing me age. I'm not really a drugs type of guy. I assume. Is wobbly eggs still a thing? It was all the rage in the 90s, but I don't know. I'm a bit out of touch on that subject. And obviously rent boys. However, let's watch the video. It's funny, and I'll obviously point out why the farmer is 100% right, and why, as usual, human sculpted pork cube James O'Brien is once again wrong.
Talking over me, and let someone who actually knows speak for once, and I know that's difficult for you, James.
Why are you so rude, Charlie? It's not my fault.
Rude.
It's not my fault.
You've just made. You are the rudest person on the radio because you sit there with your thumb in your knob.
I'm the second rudest person on the radio at the moment. At this moment, Charlie.
When a farmer inherits his farm and he can't afford to pay that inheritance tax because it's hundreds of thousands of pounds and he only makes £30,000 a year.
Well, can we crunch the numbers quickly?
That's his home, James.
Can we crunch the numbers quickly?
Yeah, by all means.
So hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of tax, presuming, of course, that it's passed from spouse to spouse and then to heir. So it's in excess of £3 million. So for hundreds of thousands of pounds at a 20% tariff, regardless of what the figure is, the percentage is 20%. You'd have to be living in an estate worth sort of £6, £7, or £8 million.
No, 4.5 million, James.
No, hundreds of thousands of pounds, you said.
4.5, yeah, exactly.
So that's 1.5 million, 20% of 1.5 million over 10 years.
Yeah, and how are you going to pay that?
40% for everybody else.
How are you going to pay that when you earn 25 grand a year?
The same. Well, I don't. How can you possibly be arguing, Charlie? Charlie,
my house is protected. When a farmer inherits his farm, his house is at risk.
Why don't you sell some stuff?
Like what, James?
Well, some of you,
Who's going to buy it?
Some of your land.
Who's going to buy it?
That should be boiling your piss in the bladder, that. The arrogance of these people. Why don't you just sell some stuff like it's easy? The point any normal human would make is that just because on paper you've got some property that's worth a lot of money doesn't mean you're floating in cash and you can just whip 10 grand out your arse pocket. The exact same is true of a little old woman who lives in a house in the middle of London that's valued at £1.5 million, but she hasn't got a pot to piss in because she's living off a state pension. Yes, if she bought the house in the 70s and it was worth almost nout then, because in the 70s the world made sense and we hadn't collapsed the borders and imported 10 million randos who all need somewhere to live, because that's the basics of supply and demand, which I wouldn't expect someone with a head full of horse shit like James O'Brien, a communist activist, to know anything about. But that's easy to understand if you're normal in the brain, all right? It's very basic. You buy a house in the 70s for nout, pay it off by 2005 or something, and then you're living on a state pension. And yes, on paper the house is worth a couple of million quid, but you don't want to move because you're old, so you just live there. And why should you move? Because it's your house and you bought it. And you've got to pay your gas and your lecky and your council tax and your bills, all those bills that people, random Somalians who live in Kensington don't have to pay. 8 grand a month that we're paying in rent for them in that story I covered yesterday, right? And they're not rich. They'll be comfortable if they've got a decent state pension and the house is paid off. But they're not rich. They're probably getting by on a couple of grand a month. And that's the same old problem. The government taxes people who get by on a couple of grand a month as if they're billionaires. It's completely arse backwards. Everyone watching this understands it. On paper, the farm's worth £4.5 million because it's got a lot of land attached to it, but you haven't got any cash in the bank and you shouldn't have to sell your property because it's yours, not the government's. It's basically, it's the same as the unrealised gains taxes. I've got some shares in SpaceX. I've got no money. My current account's not full. Eventually, I might sell that stuff and get money, but it's a bit ridiculous to look at it on paper and go, aha, in the future you'll be rich, so give me 50 grand now. Does that make any sense? No, it doesn't, unless you're James O'Brien, because he's a log.
Who's going to buy it?
I don't know. Lots of people are trying to buy land. We spoke to.
No, that's the funny
What
thing.
do you want a name?
Another farmer's not going to buy
John.
it, are they?
John's going to buy it.
Farmer,
John is going to buy it.
John's going to build solar panels on it.
John, I don't know what he's going to do with it, but he's going to. But you asked me who was going to buy it, which you don't recognise. You're shouting at me again.
Panels. We've had the offers for wind farms.
Well, there you go. Then what are you complaining about?
What are you complaining about? What are you complaining about? Just sell your stuff because the government wants you to. The government wants to force you to sell your ancestral land to property developers to whack up big blocks of flats, big ugly blocks of flats, like the one you see in London, big manky glass dildos full of Egyptians. Do you want one of them on your farmland, do you? Because I don't, and it ain't my farm. So I dare say this fella's a little bit ticked off.
Because we don't want to concrete over the land. I know you're a townie. I know you're happy living in your liberal elite world of London. But for us, the countryside is the countryside. It's where our food comes from, James.
So you've been offered.
You seem to have forgotten that. You seem to have forgotten that, haven't you, James?
Charlie, you
can't
don't.
accept it.
Okay, mate. I'm going to have a
I'm
little.
not your mate. I hate you. I think you're an idiot.
Okay.
I think you're a lefty, liberal, woke idiot.
Okay, Charlie.
Let's tarmac the AOMBs.
Charlie.
Let's tarmac them. Yeah, get some solar farms on there. Yeah, why not, James?
I think
hey, James, you like immigrants. You probably want to see some homes there as well, don't you?
Well, down with homes.
When was the last time you went to a farm?
I grew up on a working farm. I probably should have mentioned that sooner. I grew up just outside Kidderminster in Worcestershire. Farmers are all around Chaddersley, Corbett and that area.
So what, your dad was a farmer?
No, I've explained several. Do you listen to this programme?
So when you... No, I don't.
Well, how can you have such strong...
I think you're an idiot.
How can you have such strong views about me then?
Because the few times I have listened to you, I heard how you speak to people. You talk over...
Yeah, welcome to the real world, James. That's pretty much everyone who listens to you. They don't listen regularly. They just occasionally come across you on Twitter or Facebook or something, and after 4 seconds listening to you, they do want to roundhouse kick your crusty Weetabix-like lips off. That's what happens, because you're detestable, hypocritical, baggy-faced shit for brains. That's what you are, James. That was an unbelievable conversation. I mean, all right, well, we may as well do the last 30 seconds out of morbid curiosity.
And cut them off, like you've done to me.
Down with that sort of thing, Charlie?
You are down with that, I know. That's what you love.
I mean down with talking over people and shouting at them.
Oh, I'll shout at you. I'll give you everything that you try and give me.
I've tried to give you a fair hearing.
You haven't at all.
Okay.
I pointed the facts to you and you won't accept it.
Okay.
You know nothing, James. Stick in your London liberal lefty wokeism. You know nothing about farming.
10:53.
Yeah, brilliant. Well done, Mr. Farmyacker. Love that. If he went for a walk around my local town, I'd guarantee he wouldn't get 10 yards from the train station without people queuing up to lamp him. The man is an absolute weasel. I'd love him to talk like that to me in person. I'd give him so many lefts, he'd beg me for a right. The bloke is a rat, and he hasn't got the foggiest idea what he's talking about. To sum up in very simplistic terms, I mean, I know everybody watching this understands it. It's not rocket science, is it? But here's a good tweet that sums up neatly. What James fails to grasp, which is most threads of reality, but that's another issue, is that this farm is not sold. There is no cash. It's passed to the inheritor. 4.5 million in cash doesn't magically appear from anywhere, nor does the money to pay the IHT. It has to be paid from earned revenue that is already taxed. And all these comments from spiteful communists like, do what everyone else does, just pay the tax or sell it. And Bishop Beasley responds, that's the point, isn't it? He's not going to inherit a farm, he's going to inherit a gigantic tax liability. They're going to literally want hundreds of thousands of pounds off him that he hasn't got. So he'll have to sell it. And then what they're going to do, you guessed it, gigantic glass dildo full of blokes who have hissing backpacks. Fantastic idea, love that. Or solar panels. Short-termism. It's going to be concreted over whatever they build on it. It's not growing food. This isn't rocket science, is it? Everybody needs to eat. We need more farms, not less of them. But that's just what I think. If you disagree because you're completely innumerate, or you listen to James O'Brien regularly, and as such have now got the IQ of a chicken McNugget, please let me know in the comments so we can all point and laugh. All right? Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you all tomorrow. Toodle pip. Cheers.